So we are reading Hands of Light by Barbara Brennan. We are on chapter 4, page number 23 of the book and 33 of the PDF.
It is time to stop invalidating experience that lies outside our Newtonian way of thinking and broaden our framework of reality.
Now, see, this is very, very important, right? All the stuff that we are doing in awareness, literally all the stuff, is going into expanded states of consciousness. You cannot deal with all that stuff with Newtonian physics. Newtonian physics wants things in the hand. You have to have it in your hand, only then you will accept it. Otherwise, you're not going to accept it. So we need to step up. We need to step out. This is something that we read about in Magical Child also, where the last matrix is going into expanded states of consciousness. You start from the physical, but you grow into the abstract, and then you go into the non-physical. You start going totally out there, right? So we need to drop our fascination, our stuckness with Newtonian way of thinking.
We all have had experiences of time speeding up or of losing track of time. If we become proficient in observing our moods, we can see that our personal time varies with the mood we are in, we are having. For example, we see that time is relative when we experience a very long, frightening period just before our car crashes or barely misses another oncoming car. This time, measured by the clock, is a few seconds. However, to us, time appears to have slowed down. Experience time is not measurable by a clock because a clock is a Newtonian device designed to measure the linear time defined by Newtonian mechanics.
So what is he saying over here? Time as we experience it is very different from everyone, for everyone. Also, a lot depends on our mood. What is the attitude with which we are existing at that point in time? What is our state of consciousness will determine how we experience the time also. When you do the gateway voyage, you go into an expanded state of consciousness called focus 15. And focus 15 has been termed as a state of no time, right? Time ceases to exist. Time can speed up and slow down. And we've had fantastic experiences where it would normally take in linear time for a person to move from point A to point B. When you go into, let's say it takes 10 minutes. When you go into focus 15 and then you exist in that state, you can do it in 5 minutes. And this is actual experience of people, that people actually have had these experiences after doing the gateway voyage. So again, time is very, very relative. It is not something which is fixed. But when we look at it from the Newtonian way of looking, it is fixed. That means it will move in a periodic manner because it is dependent on the clock. But as we experience time, can be totally different.
Our experience exists outside the Newtonian system. Many times we have experienced meeting someone after several years' separation. It is as if we had just seen them yesterday. In regret, people have experienced childhood events as if they were occurring in the present. We also find our memory has ordered events in a different sequence from someone else who has also experienced those events. Try comparing childhood memories with your siblings.
Right. So again, memories are something that you experience, and everyone experiences the experience in a different way. So their memory, their connection with a particular incident or a particular book or a particular event will be very different because it depends a lot on the perspective with which you are observing, right? And then it also depends on the way that you are storing. So again, as he mentions here, the same event witnessed by various people, when you ask them about the event, they will give you totally different point of views, right? Because again, they're experiencing it from their state of mind, their state of consciousness.
The Native American culture, which didn't have clocks to create linear time, divided time into two aspects, the now and all other time.
This is beautiful, right? So we have only two times. Now, generally speaking, we've got three. In the sense, we've got the now, we've got the future, and we've got the past. But here in the other cultures, it is the now and the then, right? So the then means future as well as past. Now, again, we come back here, like we can have past memories, we can actually have future memories, because when you look at it from this perspective, where the Native Americans were going into these expanded states, the native cultures had processes of actually transcending and going into these states. That experience of it is what is happening now or what is happening in the expanded state. There is nothing in between. And this is actually what is, in a way, this is what is actually there. This is what is actually true. Because in that expanded state, and especially when you're going to focus 15, everything is happening at this point. There is nothing, no distinction technically. But when you go into that expanded state, so everything is there, right? And what we are experiencing here is basically only the now.
Bhaiya, can I ask you something? The then in that was past and future.
Correct.
Because
absolutely.
In the expanded, you're saying even the past is also happening at the same time. Everything is happening at the same time.
Correct. Absolutely. Everything is happening at the same time.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
The Australian also have two kinds of time, the passing time and the great time. What occurs in the great time has sequence, but it cannot be dated.
So again, all cultures have their own cosmology, right? They actually label these expanded states in their own way. So again, the Aborigines are saying the greater time and and what is occurring now, what is the passing time, that is what is happening now.
From his experience.
And the greater time, sorry.
Yes,
and the greater time is? The
greater time is what the Native Americans, what did the Native Americans say? The now time and all other time, right? So the Aborigines is what is passing time is what is the now time, and the greater time is all other time. नहीं समझ में आया?
नहीं भैया.
Shimangla, go to the previous page.
Sorry.
Not an issue.
Passing time is...
Shimangla, go to the previous page. So what does it say over here? One second, hold on, please. Okay, so over here it says, one second, hold on. Let me annotate.
The great time.
One second. Okay, so what does it say here? Over it says now and all other time. And over here it says passing time and the great time. Okay. So passing time is the now.
Yeah.
And greater time is the other time. It's the same thing.
Achha, okay. That means it's the coming, the future.
No, one second.
Or anything.
When
else.
you go into the greater time or all other time, what does it mean by all other time? Right? It means the past and the future. Okay. The now is what we are experiencing now at this present moment. Okay. Yeah, what is the passing time is what we are experiencing right now. What is passing right now? What we are experiencing right now. The greater time is always the past or the future or anything that's coming or which has gone. And the other time is the same as the greater time.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I've got it. Thank you.
One second.
Thank you. And what occurs is the greater time.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
Lawrence Lishan, from his experience testing clairvoyance, has defined two times, the regular linear time and clairvoyant time. Clairvoyant time is the quality of time experienced by clairvoyants when they are using their gifts. It is similar to the great time. What occurs has sequence but can only be seen from the point of view of being or experiencing that sequential flow.
Okay, so now what does this imply? Right? Again, he has defined two times: the regular linear time, which is the now, and the clairvoyant time, which is the greater time. Okay, now he sees this is very important. What occurs as sequence, but can only be seen from the point of view of being or experiencing that sequential flow. Right? So if I step into a different perspective, or if I step into a different flow of time, how we are experiencing that time will shift. Right? So if I'm looking at this is time, for example, right? And I'm looking at it from here, I will have one experience. If I'm looking at it from here, I will have a different experience. So it depends on your perspective. How are you viewing that time? Okay.
What occurs has sequence but can only be seen from the point of view of being or experiencing that sequential flow. As soon as the clairvoyant actively tries to interfere with the sequence of events she is witnessing, she is immediately thrown back and will no longer be witnessing events outside the normal here and now framework.
So one is the clairvoyant. Okay, you're going into an expanded state and you're just witnessing. Right? Now, if you try to interfere with the flow, like many times, when people are making predictions, they tend to look at the thing and tell you that, okay, this is what is going to happen. They have technically interfered with the time and they go into sequential time. So this is what is going to happen, this after this. So it is possible to go into that expanded state and have a witness attitude and then not do anything about it and allow things to happen as they are happening. But when you start looking at it and you attempt to manipulate it for the benefit of anyone, you are automatically coming back into linear time. You're not in that state of expanded awareness. So you have to be able to shift between the two states to manage it in a better way. Okay, I'm sure that she'll not say it in that way, but this is what actually happens. When you can shift from taking an observation, coming back into linear time, and seeing how the sequence of events will go, whether it is going to manifest in what we are wanting to manifest or not, and then shifting back and seeing the difference after we have changed the sequence, what is the effect of that particular sequence. So you can actually go back and forth into these states of consciousness or these states of time.
She must then refocus her attention to clairvoyant time. The rules that govern such movement from one time frame to another are not well understood. Most clairvoyants will be led to read a particular time frame of a person's life or past life according to the needs of the person. Some clairvoyants can simply focus on whatever time frame is requested.
So again, when we go into these expanded times, when a question is asked, right, this is what we do in the one breath technique that we learn in the excursion workshop, where we can actually go into that altered state and get answers for ourselves as well as for others, right? So this is what she's saying over here, that a clairvoyant, right, a person who can go into these expanded states can get answers from the perspective in which they are actually looking at the issue. So you can request that, okay, look at it from this aspect. What is the result? Look at it from that aspect. What is the result? So you get a more holistic kind of a point of view about whatever we are looking at.
Einstein's space-time continuum states that the apparent linearity of events depends on the observer. We are all too ready to accept past lives as literal physical lives that have happened in the past in a physical setting like this one. Our past lives may be happening right now in a different space-time continuum. Many of us.
1 second. So now again, when when you're looking, like whatever we are experiencing right now, right? It is one of the space-time continuums which are out there. Now, the moment we shift our attention to another space-time continuum, our entire perspective of looking at the thing will shift. So our reality can actually take a shift. So when we are talking about it, let's say from the principle of Ho'oponopono, where we are clearing the field, right? So we are changing our perspective. We are shifting the way that we are looking at something. So we can move from one space-time continuum, we can move into another space-time continuum, because all these space-time continuums are existing simultaneously. This is something, if you see those movies, Back to the Future, he explains it over there, and this is what we are talking about. I am coming on this track. This is the space-time continuum I'm moving in, and I come to a point over here, and I have a choice. I can go that way, I can go this way. Now, if I go this way, I have this line continuing. If I go this way, I have this line continuing. But actually, both are existing. So I can shift my perspective if I feel like it, right? This is also the case which is made out for parallel universes, where universes are existing, multiple universes are existing at the same time. And again, wherever we put our attention, that is where we land up. Now, this is something that we were also seeing in when we were watching the Fringe series, right? It didn't really come to that because we stopped watching it. But ultimately, even in Fringe, you go into these parallel universes where there are two space-time continuums moving at the same time, and different things are happening in different continuums. And your personality is existing there as well as over here. Yes, Renuji, you want to say something?
Yeah, is this almost like which choice you take?
Absolutely.
Paths that which choice you take, you'll be going down that path instead of the other.
Correct,
so
absolutely.
You're trying to say both are existing, but it's which one we go to, we'll go there.
Correct. So in the
it's similar to that, that means.
Yeah, so this is a shamanic technique also. In the PD also we apply it, where suppose you have a habit, right? Now, this habit is working on you. Now, if you want to change it, you got to go to the origin where it started from and rehash it over there so it shifts, right? Now, what are you doing? You are existing in point A, but you're going back in an expanded state of consciousness to point B, reconverting the way that you experience that experience whenever you experienced it in the past, and rechange it over here, and that immediately shifts what is happening in point A. So how does that happen? Because you're shifting your space-time continuum. You're shifting the way that you're looking at something. So now you're not following this trajectory. Whatever you've done else, it goes into the next trajectory and combines with the old line. So now you're experiencing point A in a totally different perspective.
So that's the same thing as when you go, they say when you heal yourself from an incident in childhood, and it gets cleared at that point in meditation, and then you will then
exactly
from
that
now
is,
on you have changed the step.
Exactly. So you've shifted your time space continuum, right? You've shifted from that trajectory, you've shifted to another trajectory, and now you're going on this timeline. Okay.
Okay. I got it. Got it, Bhaiya. Thank you.
Our past lives may be happening right now in a different space-time continuum. Many of us have experienced past lives and feel their effects as if they were a short time ago. But we rarely speak of how our future lives are affecting the one we are experiencing right here and now. As we live our life now, likely that we are rewriting our personal history, both past and future.
So what is happening now will become your past, and your future is dependent on the past. So whatever you are doing now is influencing your past and your future. So what he is clearly saying, as we live our lives now, it becomes more likely that we are rewriting our personal history, both past and future. So what we were just discussing here, that what we are experiencing now, we can go back into the past, rehash it over here, and change the future. So at all times, we are constantly recreating ourselves. We're constantly rewiring ourselves. We're constantly reinventing ourselves as we keep going forward, right? And that is what growth is all about. That is what we are here for transformation, for evolution, for constant growth. And we have to be aware that we can affect the past from the future. This was also done in there was an experiment which was done where they had the random number generators. We've spoken about random number generators, which create ones and zeros, right? Now, what they did, they recorded an experiment, or they recorded the numbers being generated by a random number generator in, let us say, 1970. Right now, the tape is recorded and kept. No one has seen it. In 1990, the people in a program were told to influence what was recorded on that track in 1970. And when they saw the track, when they observed the track, they found that what these people in 1990 were wanting was on the track. So they screened the result in 1970, the recording which was there in 1970 in 1990. Now, of course, don't take this thing for the years, but it is something like that, that it's recorded in point A, no one sees it. In point B, some people are told to influence what was recorded in 1970 or in point B, and it gets influenced, right? So what is happening? We can influence our past from the future. This is actually scientifically proven also, right? So this is exactly what happens when we actually work on it.
Another important consequence of Einstein's relativity is the realization that matter and energy are interchangeable. Mass is nothing but a form of energy. Matter is simply slowed down or crystallized energy. Our bodies are energy. That is what this whole book is about. I have introduced the concept of energy bodies in this book, but have not stressed that our physical body is energy also.
So Einstein's theory of relativity is that E is equal to mc squared, right? So E is equal to energy, m is equal to mass, and c is equal to velocity. So energy cannot be destroyed. Matter cannot be destroyed. It will be transformed into something else, but it cannot be destroyed. So let us say we are burning something. We think that we have destroyed it, but it is getting converted into ash and carbon dioxide. So matter is never destroyed. When we boil water, we feel the water has evaporated, but the water is still there. If we again put a condenser in the atmosphere, the water will come back, right? So matter cannot be destroyed. Basically, this is what he's saying. So mass is another form of energy. So you also have these concepts which are called potential energy and kinetic energy, right? Potential energy is energy which has potential. So for example, coal has potential energy. Steam has kinetic energy because it actually can move things, right? So you have the concept of static energy and dynamic energy also. Dynamic energy is energy which is moving, and static energy is energy which is still. So they're interchangeable. They can move from one to the other.
Paradox. In the 1920s, physics moved into the strange and unexpected reality of the subatomic world. Every time physicists asked nature a question in an experiment, nature answered with paradox. The more they tried to clarify the situation, the stronger the paradoxes became. Finally, physicists realized that paradox is part of the intrinsic nature of the subatomic world upon which all of our physical reality exists.
So very clear, right? Some things are beyond our understanding. And a paradox is something which is right in this way, it is right in the other way also. So we really don't know what is right and what is wrong. So whenever we are going into the deeper state of consciousness, the paradox always plays up, because you're always like today when we are going into a deep state of meditation. Now we've experienced something. Now the question is always a paradox. Did I imagine it or did I experience it? Is it real or is it not real? Will it happen? Will it not happen? Right? Now we don't know the answer to that. So nature, when we are going into depth of experiencing and understanding nature at the subatomic level, becomes very confusing. We don't know what is happening actually. Because when we are going deeper, I don't know if it will come here, but particles are appearing from somewhere and they are disappearing somewhere, and we don't know where they are appearing from and where they are disappearing to. So, and we are all made by these atomic particles. So the fact that we are here in Newtonian physical terms, but at the subatomic level, we are here and not here at the same time. Okay, so it's a paradox.
For example, one can set up an experiment that proves light is a particle. A small change in this experiment will prove that light is a wave. Therefore, to describe the phenomenon of light, both the concept of a wave and a particle must be used. Thus, we now move into a universe based on the concept both and. Physicists call this complementarity. That is, to describe a phenomenon, if we continue to think in such terms as particles and waves, one must use both types of descriptions. These types are complements of each other rather than opposites, according to the old concept of either or.
So, so we need to move what he's saying very clearly, that things can be this and that, not this or that. When we are looking at it from the Newtonian physics point of view, we always think of terms of this or that. But when we start going into expanded states, it can be this and that. So this is a very, very, it's really talked about experiment where light can be a particle as well as a wave. So in this experiment, what happens is that in first case, there's only one hole which is made on a paper and a light is shone through the paper. You will get 1 point of light on the opposite wall, right? Now, what they do is it's called the double slit test, where they make 2 slits in the paper behind and then they shine a light from behind. Now, what happens is in the first case, there was only one hole. So 1 point of light came. When there's a double slit, there is not 2 points of light. There are multiple points of light which come and many lines start to come, which shows that the light is not moving as a particle. When there's only one light, right, it's a particle. But when it's moving in a wave form, the 2 central ones will be the brightest and then lighter, 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 aise karke, to infinity they will go, right? So that shows that light is a wave and a particle at the same time. So you cannot define that light is a particle or light is a wave. It is both. It depends on the perspective with which you're looking at it.
For example, Max Planck discovered that the energy of heat radiation, like the radiator in your house, is not emitted continuously but appears in the form of discrete energy packets called quanta. Einstein postulated that all forms of electromagnetic radiation can appear not only as waves but also in the forms of these quanta.
So again, there is a pulsation going on. There's a rhythm to everything. Everything is pulsing around us, right? And that pulsing will create a wave as well as a packet of energy. So it will keep pulsating. Everything is pulsating around us.
These light quanta or energy packets have been accepted as bona fide particles. At this stage of the game, a particle, which is the closest definition of a thing, is an energy packet.
So the quanta is basically energy, but it is still observable. So it becomes a particle.
As we penetrate deeper into matter, nature does not show us any isolated basic building blocks, as Newtonian physics suggested.
So Newtonian physics suggested that everything is made out of molecules. Molecules are made out of atoms. Atoms are made out of neutrons, electrons, and protons. But as we go into subatomic particles, what is the electron made out of? Then you're going into quanta, and we don't know from where the quanta comes and where it goes, right? So how do we know what is the basic building block of everything? But when we are looking at it from the perspective of Newtonian physics, then what happens is valid, that the basic building block is the atom. Okay, but we are going deeper.
The search for the basic building blocks of matter had to be abandoned when physicists found so many elementary particles that they could hardly be called elementary. Through experiments in the past few decades, physicists found matter to be completely mutable, and on the subatomic level, matter does not exist with certainty in definite places, but rather shows tendencies to exist. All particles can be transmuted into other particles. They can be created from energy and can be transmuted into other particles. They can be created from energy and can vanish into energy. Where and when this happens, we cannot determine exactly, but we do know it is continuously occurring.
Okay, so at the subatomic level, things are appearing and disappearing. It's converting into energy and converting into a particle. Where it is happening, how it is happening, we have no idea about how it is happening, right? Also, what he says over here is matter does not exist with certainty at a definite place, but rather shows a tendency to exist. So everything is a probability. Where the particle will be is a probability, because it can be here or there at the same time. We do not know where it will be, right? And this is what causes influence at a distance also, because the particle can be anywhere, right? And your thought, again, now the particle is also a form of energy. Your thought is a form of energy. So when we are sending an energy, a thought pattern out, it can be anywhere. That's what makes our thoughts very, very powerful. So we need to be observant about our thoughts, because we're constantly radiating and generating energy with our thoughts. So again, that's what we keep repeating, that watch your thoughts. Your thoughts are very powerful. We have to take responsibility for what we are thinking. So this is the science behind what our thoughts can do for us.
On the personal level, as we move more into the world of modern psychology and spiritual development, we find the old forms of either or also dissolving into the form of both and. We are no longer bad or good. We no longer only hate or love someone. Within us, we find much broader abilities. We can feel both love and hate, and all the emotions in between for the same person.
So again, there is no good or bad, right? There is, so saying that this is good and this is bad really doesn't work. That's why, at least personally speaking, I've shifted into uplifting and depleting. And it is relative to what you're looking at. What is the perspective which we are looking at? So you cannot have a clear-cut definition of literally anything, because everything is and or and and both. It is not and or, right? So you cannot distinguish, because everything is everything.
We act responsibly, we find the old dualism of God devil dissolving into a whole in which we can find the goddess God within merging with the God goddess without. Anything evil is not the opposite of goddess God, but resistance to the God goddess force. All is composed of the same energy. The goddess God force is both black and white, both masculine and feminine. It contains both the white light and the velvet black void.
So again, yin and yang, yeah, right. Dark and light, everything is there. Everything is right there. Now he says one thing over here. The opposite of God goddess is nothing but the resistance to the God goddess force, right? Now, where does that resistance come from? When we look at ourselves and we are talking in the tones of the small guy and the big guy, the resistance always comes from the small guy. It will never come from the big guy, because the big guy is aligned to the God goddess force. It is aligned to the universal consciousness. It is aligned to your higher state of consciousness, right? So when we keep repeating that our thing here is to step out of the way, get rid of the ego, allow things to happen. When they happen, it will happen effortlessly, because we are aligning ourselves to the universal consciousness, or what she terms over here as the God goddess force, right? So we need to align ourselves to that force, which is both masculine and feminine at the same time, good and bad at the same time. It is everything at the same time. So when we jack into the flow, when we start flowing and allowing, automatically things start to happen.
As the reader can see, we are still using concepts steeped in dualism, but it is a world of apparent opposites that complement each other, not real opposites. In this system, the dualism is being used to propel us forward into unity.
Right. Sorry. So, so what is it? When we say good or bad, God is. So when we are saying good or bad, we are being dualistic, right? Male, female. There's duality involved. There is dark and there is night. But ultimately, when the two opposites start to merge and they become one, that is when we get to wholeness. That is when we get to oneness. That is what all of us are striving to get to that wholeness where that duality drops. Okay. If you look at it from Vedantic principles, this is the basic quest of any sadhak, to transcend duality, to get out of the realm of duality, which will take you out of the realms of vasana also. Vasana is always dependent that I don't have something. I need to have this experience. There's duality involved. When we transcend it, then we become one. There is nothing to experience and there is no experience at the same time.
Beyond dualism, the hologram. Physicists have found that particles can be waves at the same time because they are not real physical waves like sound or water waves, but rather they are probability waves. Probability waves do not represent probabilities of things, but rather probabilities of interconnections.
So this is very important, right? Probabilities of interconnections. We need to understand that for anything to happen, many things have to happen before that thing happens. So everything in the world is interconnected. It is all interrelated. You cannot remove one thing from another thing, right? Because manifestation is codependent on a lot of things, right? So you cannot remove it, and everything in life is a probability at the end of the day.
This is a tough concept to understand. But essentially, the physicists are saying there is no such thing as a thing. What we used to call things are really events or paths that might become events.
So again, there is no thing, right? Because ultimately, when you look at it, nothing is there because everything converts. When you go into the subatomic state, nothing is existing. But when we observe something, it becomes an event, right? So if I'm observing the table, I'm making it real. If I stop observing the table is not existing for me. So my observation is what is making the event happen and converting it into a thing, right? So this is very important, this thing, that we are actually creating our reality because we are observing it. If we didn't observe it, the reality would not be there, at least in our conception.
Our old world of solid objects and the deterministic laws of nature is now dissolved into a world of wave-like patterns of interconnections. Concepts like elementary particle, material substance, or isolated object have lost their meaning. The whole universe appears as a dynamic web of inseparable energy patterns. The universe is thus defined as a dynamic, inseparable whole, which always includes the observer in an essential way.
So again, the observer is who is creating the reality for himself or herself, right? And reality, the way that we know it, is basically just an interconnected web of energy. This is something that was shown very clearly in the movie Matrix, where the web, where everyone was existing, was nothing but a computer program or a energy reality which everyone was just experiencing in that. And then when you stepped out of that, when you poked your head out of that, you got to really see what was actual reality. So again, growth, transcending, getting to the other side. This is what life is actually all about.
If the universe is indeed composed of such a web, there is logically no such thing as a part. Thus, we are not separated parts of a whole. We are a whole.
So, since everything is interrelated and interconnected, we are everything, and everything is us. So again, that saying that if a butterfly flutters its wings in Brazil, it affects the entire universe. So anything we are thinking, anything we are doing is affecting the entire universe. Now, when you look at it from the perspective of power versus force, the more we raise our level of consciousness, the more we raise the level of consciousness of the whole, right? So one person operating at 700 can have an effect on a large number of people, right? Shift the states of consciousness of a large number of people. And people operating at a lower level can pull down the entire state of consciousness because everything is interrelated and interconnected.
Recently, physicist Dr. David Bohm said in his book, The Implicate Order, that primary physical laws cannot be discovered by a science that attempts to break the world into its parts. He has written of an implicate enfolded order, which exists in an unmanifested state and is the foundation upon which all manifest reality rests.
So what is he saying over here, right? There is order beyond the chaos, and everything is happening according to a process, right? There is order. The implicit order means that everything is implicit, that it is going to happen. It is moving in a particular way. It is going to manifest in a particular way, right? That order is always there, but it is not yet explicit. That means it's implicit. Like, for example, food is getting cooked in your kitchen, right? Now, the implicit order is that you're going to eat it. But whether you really will, that's a question mark. But basically, the probability is that you will eat the food. So everything is there. It's going to manifest. Okay, until it manifests, it's not explicit, it's implicit.
He calls this manifest reality the explicit unfolded order. Parts are seen to be in immediate connection, in which their dynamical relationships depend in an irreducible way on the state of the whole system. Thus, one is led to a new notion of unbroken wholeness, which denies the classical idea of analyzability of the world into separately and independently existent parts.
So since everything is affecting everything else, you cannot separate one thing from another thing because everything is interrelated. This is something that has been experienced, when they eradicate a certain animal or something from a forest, the entire forest suffers because there is an implicit order in which the forest functions. And they've experienced this when in England, I don't know where it's written, I don't remember, but I have read somewhere that they shot all the foxes because the foxes used to come and eat up the chickens, and the entire ecology of that entire place started to suffer because the foxes were removed. This is something that we've seen when, let's say, mosquitoes are removed from a place, they're killed up. The other elements start becoming so much that it becomes a big problem. Like they had these hydrangeas which were there in the pools, and when they killed the mosquitoes, the fish were surviving on the larvae of the mosquitoes, and they were eating also those hydrangeas ka this thing. The hydrangeas started taking over the entire lakes. Why? Because the mosquitoes were killed, something else got affected. So everything is connected with something else. You cannot isolate anything with that. That's why it's very important that whenever we are taking a decision, if we get a higher perspective to it, then we can observe that by doing this, what is the effect on the whole, and then doing what we are doing. That's why the one breath technique is a very powerful technique, provided we use it.
Dr. Bohm states that the holographic view of the universe is a jumping off place to begin to understand the implicate enfolded and explicit and unfolded orders. The hologram concept states that every piece is an exact representation of the whole and can be used to reconstruct the entire hologram.
So in the hologram, we are going to come to it, so I'm not explaining it now. But in a hologram, a piece of the puzzle contains all the information. This is what he is saying. So the hologram concept states that every piece is an exact representation of the whole and can be used to reconstruct the whole hologram. So if there is a plate, you cut it in half, it contains the whole. You cut it into 100, just cut it into a chip, and it will still contain all the information, although at a lower resolution maybe, but all the information is there in every part of the hologram.
In 1971, Denis Gabor received a Nobel Prize for constructing the first hologram. It was a lensless photograph in which a wave field of light scattered by an object was recorded as an interference pattern on a plate. When the hologram or photograph recording is played a coherent light beam, the original wave pattern is regenerated in a three-dimensional image. Every piece of the hologram is an exact representation of the whole and will reconstruct the entire image.
So basically in a hologram, I think it's okay. So in a hologram, what do? There's an object, right? They shine a light on that object and it moves in a particular way. And they shine another light on the object and it moves in a different way. Those lights, the reflections, are again posted on a plate. And the whole reflection of the apple then gets printed on that plate. Now, if you shine a laser light on the plate in a particular angle, it will generate the whole apple. Now, if I cut the plate in half and shine the laser light, I will still get the image of the light of the apple. If I cut it in half again and shine it on the plate, again I'll get the image of the whole apple. So what he says over here, every piece of the hologram is an exact representation of the whole and will reconstruct the entire image. Okay, so we live in a holographic universe. Every part has the imprint of the whole.
Dr. Carl Pribram, a renowned brain researcher, has accumulated evidence over a decade that the brain's deep structure is essentially holographic. He states that research from many laboratories, by sophisticated analysis of temporal and/or spatial frequencies, demonstrates that the brain structures sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch holographically. The information is distributed throughout the system so that each fragment can produce the information of the whole.
So now what is he attempting to say here, right? That even the brain is holographic in nature. You really can't pinpoint where the information is stored. They just can't do it. So where is the mind? We can't do it. The brain has a structure. We've also been able to identify that when you're focusing on seeing, the occipital lobes work. When you're focusing on hearing, the temporal lobes get activated. When you're focusing on cognitive thought, the frontal lobe gets activated. But it does not mean that the temporal lobe cannot do thinking, right? Or the temporal lobe cannot see, or the occipital lobe cannot do the thinking. It's just that we are seeing it, but ultimately each part of the brain can do all the activities. It is just that it is not tuned to do that, right? But now the mind is not in the brain. There are people who don't have a brain. There's only liquid in their skull, right? They don't have the lobes and all that, but they are still absolutely hale and hearty and they're living. So how is that possible? If the mind was in the brain, then that would not be possible, right? So again, what he's clearly saying is that the brain also operates in a holographic form.
Dr. Pribram uses the hologram model to describe not only the brain but the universe as well. He states that the brain employs a holographic process to abstract from a holographic domain that transcends time and space. Parapsychologists have searched for the energy that might transmit telepathy, psychokinesis, and healing. From the point of view of the holographic universe, these events emerge from frequencies that transcend time and space. They don't have to be transmitted. They are potentially simultaneous and everywhere.
So since the brain is working in a holographic universe, it works holographically. That means it can be in the past and the future at the same time. So any kind of psychic ability, any kind of way in which we are going into an expanded state of consciousness is connecting into that holographic universe, right? And when we are connecting to the holographic universe, we can connect to the frequencies of events. We can connect to the frequencies of happenings. We can connect to the frequencies of capabilities. So we can get downloads. We can look at records. We can go into the past. We can go into the future. It's all right there, but we have to be able to tune into it so that we can get the downloads and become aware of it. We can actually start observing it. That is what the game of going into expanded states of consciousness at the end is all about.
When we will speak of energy fields of the aura in this book, we will be using very archaic terms from the point of view of these physicists. The phenomenon of the aura is clearly both inside and outside linear time and three-dimensional space.
So again, when we are doing the OBE program by William Bullman also, he says that an out-of-body experience is an in-body experience, right? As without, so within. So over here, he says that the phenomenon of the aura is clearly both inside and outside linear time. It is there and not there at the same time. How we observe it is what the game is all about.
As in the case studies I have already presented, I saw the events of Ed's puberty when he broke his coccyx, because he carried that experience with him in his energy field.
So now what does this imply? Anything that happens to us is recorded in our energy field. And anyone who has the ability to tune into the frequency can actually observe whatever was happening. And this is actually true. I'm talking from experience.
As in the case studies I have already presented, I saw the events of Ed's puberty when he broke his coccyx, because he carried that experience with him in his energy field. The shaft of the lover can be perceived in the present energy field, and the clairvoyant can apparently go back in time and witness the event as it happened. A great many of the experiences related in this book require more than 3 dimensions for explanation. Many of them appear to be instantaneous. The ability to see inside the body at any level with a varying resolution could imply the use of additional dimensions.
So what she's talking about is that, yes, anyone who can tune in can see all the events, number one, and anyone who can tune in can go into the body and actually see what is happening inside the body from the point of view of energetics, right? And then once you can see, then you can rectify, then you can heal, then you can put into system.
The ability to perceive events from the past by simply asking for that information, or to see a probable event and then to change that event by intervening through the healing process, could imply non-linear time. The ability to see an event that will take place in the future goes beyond linear time.
So when you're in that state of consciousness, you can actually foresee how an event will proceed, or the probability of an event manifesting, right? Now, if it is not going in the way that you would perceive would be for the highest good, you can start tweaking it, doing something differently, which will result in something else occurring, right? Because as something is occurring to you now, that is what is going to manifest. So if I tweak and I tune the way that I am observing something now, I will change the trajectory of what is going to happen in the future. So if I shift my perspective, I can shift whatever I want in the future. So again, this puts a lot of power in our hands as to how are we observing something? How are we perceiving something? What is the state of consciousness with which we are looking at something will totally affect what is going to happen or what is going to manifest. It has already happened, technically speaking, but we can tweak it so that when we experience it in a totally different way or a different manner. So we are going beyond linear time, right? We are going into expanded states of consciousness when we are doing this.
In using the concept of the fields to describe the aura, we will be steeped in dualism. That is, we will separate the field from us and observe it as a phenomenon that exists as a part of us. We will use terms like my field and her aura, etc. This is dualistic. I must apologize for this and say that frankly, at this point, I am quite unable to convey these experiences without using the old frameworks.
So while we are living here, right, this is good or bad, dualism has to be there to understand something. The moment we understand it and we transit and we go into oneness and wholeness, then the concept of observing something will also drop. So naturally, whenever we are experiencing something, we have to experience it from the point of view of dualism. We are not yet there where we can transcend dualism.
From the holographic framework of reality, Each piece of the aura not only represents, but also contains the whole. Thus, we can only describe our experience with a phenomenon that we both at the same time observe and create.
So like the brain is a hologram, the universe is a hologram, the aura is also a hologram. And a part of the aura can represent the whole. So what is the state of your field becomes very, very important.
Every observation creates an effect on the observed pattern. We are not just part of the pattern, we are the pattern. It is us and we are it. Only the term it now needs to be abandoned and replaced with some other more appropriate term to release the blocks we experience in our brains when we try to communicate.
So every observation creates an effect on the observed pattern, right? So again, when we are thinking of something, we are talking of something, we are creating an effect on the whole pattern. And this is something that we need to be aware of, right? So awareness is the key. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Is it taking me to the disha or to the direction where I want to go? Or is it not taking me? If it is not taking me, what's the point of observing it? There's no point, because you will be affecting the field and you are part of the field. So when you observe something, you affect yourself, right? So again, we come back to zero limits, where very clearly was told that we need to take responsibility for whatever we are doing. We are responsible for creating our reality. And what she's explaining over here is beautifully in scientific terms, really telling us that that is what is true.
Physicists have used the terms probabilities of interconnections or dynamic web of inseparable energy patterns. When we begin to think in terms of a dynamic web of inseparable energy patterns, all the auric phenomena described in this book do not appear particularly unusual or strange.
So again, everything is interconnected and interrelated. Right now, when these books were published, at that time it was hoo-ha, yeah, useless, nonsense and all that. I've experienced this in my life also, right? That whatever you're doing is nonsense. And then after some time, I found whatever we were telling, those people who used to say it is nonsense, they've started doing it. Why? Because that is the truth. It is what is, whether we like it or not.
All experience is interconnected. Therefore, if we become aware of this and allow that interconnectedness into our cognitive processes, we can be aware of all events independent of all time.
So now what is it saying very clearly, right? That everything is interconnected. And the moment we expand our ability to perceive, everything is available to us, right? Nothing is hidden. Again, this is something I'm telling you from experience. Nothing is hidden, provided you have the ears to hear, nose to smell, tongue to taste, eyes to see, and feel to feel, right? Everything is available to us because everything is interconnected. Everything is interrelated. Nothing is separated from anything else.
But as soon as we say we have fallen back into dualism. It is hard to experience this connectedness when our major experience of life is dualistic. Holistic awareness will be outside linear time and three-dimensional space and therefore will not be easily recognized. We must practice holistic experience to be able to recognize it.
So, right, like when we go into these expanded states of the higher focus levels, we feel we are not there. We are there and we are not there at the same time. We can't explain our experiences. We can feel we are shivering, but actually we are not shivering. It's a perception of shivering, right? So again, when we are going into those expanded states, everything starts to interrelate. Everything starts to get connected. You start becoming, you look at your perspectives start to change. You start looking at things from a higher level of perception rather than a lower level of perception.
Meditation is one way of transcending the limits of the linear mind and allow the connectedness of all things to become an experiential reality. This reality is very hard to communicate because we use words in a linear fashion. We need to develop vocabulary by which we can lead each other into these experiences.
So again, you ask anyone who has attended the workshops, they will find it very difficult to explain their experience to them, to you, right? Those who have not attended, but they'll still tell you go and experience it. Why? Because that experience is a very powerful experience. It's a holistic experience which you cannot describe in words. It is not possible because the level of consciousness in which we are going is not at the level of consciousness that we normally operate. So it becomes difficult to explain. It has to be experienced.
In Japanese Zen meditation, the masters give students a short phrase to concentrate on. The phrase, called a koan, is designed to help students transcend linear thought. Here is one of my favorites. What is the sound of one hand clapping? My reaction to this well-known koan is to find myself stretching out into the universe on a pattern of unheard sound that seems to flow on forever.
So a kokan is also a paradox because you don't know how it is happening or why it is happening. And then when you start contemplating on something which is non-comprehensible, you cannot comprehend it, right? You start dropping your normal way of comprehension and you start moving into the expanded states. So you could say that this is very much like the click out state that we experience, where the conscious mind is unable to process the data in the workshops, unable to process the data, it shuts down and the data is processed at a different level of consciousness, right? So this is a beautiful way of allowing yourself to experience that infinite state or that expanded state, because in spite of the fact that your normal waking conscious mind is unable to process that data. Okay, I think we can stop here because this is a paragraph ending. Anyone, anything to